This is the MyExcelOnline podcast, episode number 2.
And to me, I was like, oh, wow. I mean, this thing changes your life.
Welcome to the MyExcelOnline podcast, the need-to-know Excel insights, knowledge, and tips brought to you by the experts that know them best. Are you ready to explore your full potential and get better at Excel? It's time to stand out from the crowd with your host, John MICHALOUDIS.
G'day guys, and welcome to the MyExcelOnline podcast with your host, John MICHALOUDIS. In today's episode, we have an Excel MVP. He was an expert in Power Query. He started his career as a public accountant and worked in several companies, honing his Excel and IT skills. In 2004, he started a website called Excelguru.ca, which hosts a large knowledge base of Excel help articles, a blog, an active forum dedicated to helping users with their Excel issues. He was awarded the prestigious Microsoft MVP Award in 2006 and has held it every year since. He has also been recognized as one of Vancouver Island's top 20 under 40 business and community leaders. He has co-authored the book M is for Data Monkey, a guide to the M language in Excel Power Query. Today, he works as a full-time Excel consultant, teaching the Power BI tools to the masses. Let's welcome from British Columbia, Canada, Mr. Ken Puls. Hi, Ken. How are you, buddy?
Hey, John. How's it going? I'm doing well, man. How are you?
Good, thank you. Good. Mate, I've told our listeners a little bit about your background. I wanted to go into a little bit more detail of your journey into becoming an Excel expert.
All right. So I started working in public practice accounting way back when. I was in industry after that. And I guess the piece that really was the telling day for me, which kind of got me a little bit hooked in Excel, was we always had to use spreadsheets as we were going through and doing our accounting work. I mean, that was no surprise. But when I started working with a company called Fairwinds, and this was a fairly big place, at a golf course, a marina, and property, food and beverage establishments, and all kinds of stuff. It's kind of an amusing thing. We got purchased by a pension fund, and they sent their IT department in, and they gave us one version of Excel across every desktop. And what happened at that point is that I was the IT guy there, if you like, and the network administrator at the time. So I had to phone Toronto and say, "Listen, guys, our macro broke when you put this new version of Excel in." And they said, "Okay, great, send us the file." So I sent them the file, and then they phoned me up and they said, "Can you tell us a little bit more about this macro?" I said, "Well, okay, well, it did this." And I said, "The first thing you did was you press /Shift-N down, arrow to the right 3 times." And for anybody that worked with Excel back in the day there, you know that by hitting the / key first, you actually kicked off a different series of keystrokes than what we were sort of normally used to doing. As it turned out, I didn't have a macro in the file at all. We thought it was, but what had actually happened is that the users that I was working with had learned the Lotus keyboard shortcuts, and we thought those were a macro for doing our job. And when they gave us Excel 97, the IT department had not turned on the Lotus keyboard shortcuts, so we thought everything broke. So that was where things sort of started with it, is a little bit out of ignorance. And they said, look, hey, we'll build you a macro, and we'll send it to you. So it'll get your job done here. What do you need it to do? So we explained the whole thing, and they did build a macro. They had one of their summer interns do that. And then, as summer interns do, they leave. And we had to make a change to the macro. I, being the IT guy, got the job of doing it and opened it up and sort of looked through and figured out how it worked and whatever else, and just tinkered and played around. And I made a change to it, and it worked. And I thought, oh, this is kind of neat. So I started playing around and realized you could record macros. And it took a couple of years, I think, of tinkering back and forth with this. And then we had a really monumental change that got pushed on us. Our asset managers came into us and said, "Listen, guys, we've decided you're overstaffed. You need to cut your staff burden by 33% by next week. And by the way, we're going to ask you to do more with less. And we want it on the same time schedule. Actually, no, let's make it a little bit tighter. We need it a couple of days earlier. And, it needs to be just as accurate as it was before." So all the reasonable demands you get from upper management, less resources, tighter deadlines, and, the same request for accuracy. So at the time, I had just started playing around or been tinkering with VBA and automation in Excel. And I told my boss, "Look, man, this is the answer. We're going to have to do this." And so I kind of threw myself into Excel and started to live in it for, probably a couple of years, actually, I guess, by the time it was all done. It seems so long ago now. And I really kind of became an addict for the program and seeing what it could do with automation and playing around with it. I started asking questions in forums. I started feeling guilty about how much knowledge I was sucking out of those forums. So that's where I started my own website and started to put things, different techniques that I'd done out there onto my website, which has grown over the years into something that I'm pretty proud of. And yeah, I mean, it just kind of grew granularly. I mean, the key for me was need. I mean, we had a need to get stuff done, and that was the catalyst that kind of kicked it off. So from there, I got to say, I mean, I've seen some pretty cool things happen in my life from the MVP side. I mean, I got an email from NASA one day. I thought this was wild. I actually thought it was spam, and I replied to it anyway. And it turned out that they were adapting one of the techniques I had posted on my website, and they were using it to automate the production of PDF reports that monitored the International Space Station's power levels to make sure that it wasn't going to prematurely fall out of the sky. So pretty neat stuff. I mean, it shows you where Excel can go. So
it's pretty amazing stuff, isn't it? When you get NASA to give you a call, isn't it?
I was out with my daughter a year ago. We were actually at the school, and it was a night gazing thing because we were there to watch the International Space Station fly overhead. So I got to tell my 10-year-old daughter, "Look, there goes my project." So that was pretty funny.
Nice. And it didn't fall out of the sky, did it?
No, not yet. So, and as soon as it does, I'm going to say they adapted the code themselves and somebody else's.
Because you've been around when Excel version 97. Is that when you first started?
Yeah. I mean, the first version of Excel I ever used, I think, was actually probably Excel 4 or maybe Excel 5.
Okay.
But you know what? I mean, at that time, I mean, it was one of those, take your kid to work days, and my dad took me to work. It's that long ago.
Okay.
And that's a long time ago now, where I really started to make a change to it make a change to the way that I approached it. We were using Excel 97. That was the big year for me that I saw that consistent experience. We had VBA, and that was what really hooked me into the program. So it was from there on that I've been playing around with it every version since.
One of the first websites when I first started out learning Excel was excelguru.ca, and you have a lot of knowledge-based articles there. You've got access, you've got formulas, general tips, pivot tables, you've got everything there. You've also got a forum where people ask questions and other users give answers. It's been around since 2004. How have you seen the evolution of excelguru.ca, and also how has it helped the users over the last 11 years?
Well, the evolution of Excelguru.ca. When I first started my website, I actually had a website under my family name domain, and it had 2 pages of Excel stuff on it. And then I thought, I'm going to go and I'll register Excelguru.ca, and so I did that. And I think when it started, it was a static website. It didn't have a forum. Mm-hmm. I put on a content management system, and I believe it had 4 pages to start with. So I mean, when you look at the evolution of what's actually happened there, it's hard to believe. It's 2004, right? I mean, it's 11 years.
Yeah.
I can't believe I've had it that long, to be honest with you. It's something that's really grown over the past bit of time. It's become more popular, I think, with the forum edition. I mean, that really helps in a lot of ways with getting people answers to customizing things the way they need. It helps with getting your Google search rank too, so that more people find it and can find those answers as well. But I have some great volunteers on that site that spend a lot of time helping people out and giving them answers. They're wonderful people. I mean, and I know they do it because they like helping, they like learning, but it's a neat community. And I can't say enough about the forum world and how much knowledge you can earn there. That's where I learned everything I know about this. I mean, I've never taken, well, that's not true. I took 1 Excel course in my entire life, and I was bored. So, you look at what's there and available for free with the articles that we've written and the help that people can answer. I mean, post your workbook, ask your question, and get stuff up there to help people learn. It's amazing, isn't it? I mean, it's such a cool community kind of feel that is out there and available.
It is. And a lot of the Excel experts that I've interviewed have used forums as a base to learn Excel. That was before you had YouTube and all the, video tutorials.
Yeah, well, going back even further than that, I mean, it used to be news groups, right? And I mean, I was never a news group guy. I mean, I was always more of a forum guy. And honestly, I mean, YouTube and stuff like that hasn't been my bailiwick. I mean, I'm more of a guy that likes to write and read than watch video personally, but which is ironic because I do a lot of training videos. But I don't know. I mean, I find it fascinating how many people sort of jump on these things. But the thing I'll tell you about forums, and this is where I find the real value in it, is that people can show up, they can ask their questions with their own business business problems. So, I mean, they have their own goal to solve. And it's always better when you're trying to learn to be able to use and work with data that you understand and you identify with. And then the second part is, I mean, when you say like, hey, look, a lot of the Excel experts that we've interviewed have gone to forums. Well, my feeling is that, I mean, there's two ways to learn. The best way is to try and teach somebody. And that's what I loved about it, is that I would go to a forum and I would try and help somebody out. And when I was really new at it, I'd post a solution and I get one of the other MVPs or an expert at the time would come along and say, Ken, that's a good solution, but this one's better and here's why. So not only are you actually working through the problem yourself and working out what somebody else couldn't necessarily do because they didn't have enough background knowledge, but then you're getting somebody else that comes along and says, well, hey, look, I mean, let me expand on that and show you another way. And this is the part that I love about Excel. What makes it so fantastic is that I'm fond of telling everybody when I'm teaching classes, there's usually at least 3 ways to do anything in Excel.
That's right.
The question is, which ones have you discovered and which ones are most efficient for you? So that's what's so neat about it, is that you see all these different feelings when you get, and different ways of looking at stuff when you get multiple people involved.
That's why I love Excel, because you have different ways to skin a cat, as they say.
Absolutely.
And I'm having a look now at the stats there. You have threads, just over 4,000 threads, 18,000 posts, nearly 40,000 members. So and currently there are about 200 users online. And if one of our listeners has an issue with their data and wants to post, what is the process that they should go through?
Well, basically, I mean, you head over to excelguru.ca and you register for the forum. It'll ask you for your email address and a user ID.
And it's free?
Oh yeah, it's absolutely free, and the forum will always be free. So when you put in your user and email ID and username and whatnot, it does run you through a verification process. And the reason that we do that is that we're trying to make sure that we don't get spammers on the site. They're a real pain and they don't add any value. So once you've signed in, the nice part, what I love about my forum is that you can actually upload a workbook with your sample data. We do ask that you try to make sure that it's not sensitive, because we like to leave those posts around so others can learn from them. And then basically you ask your question. The kinds of questions that get the best answers or the most immediate answers are ones that somebody has come along and they've clearly explained, this is what I'm trying to do. I've got an example file here that I'm working with, and I've tried to do this, but it isn't working for me. And how do I make that work? Those are the best, because what we see in that, and here's the secret to getting good help from a web forum, is when we recognize that somebody wants to learn, those are the people that we bend over backwards to help. If we get somebody that comes in and says, my boss needs this now, we kind of don't tend to focus on those ones as much, because why is the boss paying you and not us if that's the case? Yeah. This is, it's a free place to get help, and it's a free place to get answers and whatnot. But the goal that we have is to help you learn how to do this stuff on yourself, and hopefully encourage you one day to come back and actually help other people out in the same way. I mean, that's the end game of it. So key pieces to recognize, I mean, everybody there is a volunteer, and basically that, I mean, you're posting your stuff and they work on their schedule. So, don't come back and say, hey, I need an answer now, because that doesn't work very well. But, if you want to learn and you're willing to take the time to do it and work with people, I mean, I've seen threads that have gone back and forth like 90 times to try and get the user the answer that they need and help them work through their business problems. I mean, wow. It's pretty staggering when you see that happen. It's cool.
All right, guys. excelguru.ca/forums. Go on there, sign up, and I'm sure you're going to get lots of value out of the forum and some free help as well. So the only caveat is don't tell them that you need your answers straight away, because you're going to get shot down. All right, so awesome. A free learning tool there online, and a great way to increase your Excel development. Now let's go on to your subject of expertise. Tell us how you became an expert in Power Query.
Trial and effort. That's probably the most honest answer. Honestly, I mean, I've done a lot of exploring of data. So we should probably circle back, I guess, just for those people who aren't familiar on what Power Query actually is. Power Query is a free download that you can get. You can just throw it into Google or Bing or whatever your favorite search engine is and say download Power Query. As long as you have Excel 2010 or 2013, you can install this thing. But the nice piece is this adds a whole new set of functionality to Excel. If you look at your Excel without Power Query and you go to the data tab, you've got about 4 or 5 icons on the left-hand side that say, can you get your data from Access or can you get it from different places? Power Query is essentially a monster application to help you get and transform and clean up data into an easy to use format. So it basically lands it into an Excel table or into Power Pivot or using Power Pivot. Why this is so important and how did I become an expert in this thing actually sort of go hand in hand is that what I know working in as an accountant is that it's often very difficult to get your hands on good, clean data that's ready to be used and ready to be consumed in a pivot table or in a chart or whatever. Instead, the data tends to float around the world in text files or in Excel files. We've got all these massive databases, but a lot of times the business user inside the organization doesn't have access to get to that database. Whether it's for political reasons or technical reasons is irrelevant. The reality is that they just can't get there. So when they're looking for something, it comes to them in the shape of a text file. My favorite text files are always the ones that they look like they were, stylistically drawn in about 1980. So they use, the minus sign for underlines and the equal sign for double underlines. And they've got repeating rows with blank header and garbage, all kinds of stuff in them, non-printing characters. And until Power Query came along, the solution to dealing with this thing was twofold. You had 2 choices. You could either try and import it through that postage stamp sized import text file window in Excel. So you could do a certain amount of cleanup or a certain amount of breaking it apart into columns or whatever else. And then you could land in a table and then you'd have to do more work to clean it all up and get it done. And then next month you'd get to do the entire process all over again. So, when you look at it, you've got these guys accountants and business analysts that are spending all this time reliving the joy of cleaning their data every single month. It's a waste of time. Let's be honest.
And they don't get paid for that.
Well, they do, but it doesn't add value to the organization. If I look at it in accounting terms, I look at it and go, that's an expense. Plain and simple. It's a cost of doing business, but it's not earning us anything as far as business intelligence goes. So, the other opportunity, if you started to work into Visual Basic for Applications, which is the programming language inside Excel, you could write an interface using VBA code to import the stuff and clean it up and whatever else to get it into that format. Now, that was good because now we would invest some time, but we would have to invest into a learning curve on VBA first. But once you had that, then you could invest some time and you could build the solution and then you could click a button and have it import. That was great. But those solutions were, depending on how you programmed it, could be a little bit fragile. So then Power Query came along, and Power Query is it's really interesting because I think it's actually one of the most well-designed user interfaces because you can do so much with a very little knowledge, and yet with a lot of knowledge, you can do amazing things. But the learning curve on Power Query is not very steep. So what I was able to do is I was able to take a text file and I said, okay, well, I'm going to import it. And right away, I got a full-size window, which is so much better than the postage stamp I was working in before. And you could go step by step and do these transformations to clean out your header or to promote your header rows and clean out garbage rows and split things up into columns and change the data types to what they needed to be. And then it would land in an Excel table. But where the real beauty came in is that it was faster to do that in Power Query than it was the classic Excel route. And not only was it faster to do it in Power Query, but when you were done, you'd right-click your table next month. So you'd get your new text file, you'd save it over top of the old one, you'd right-click your table, and you'd say refresh. And it would open up the text file and it would run it through all the same steps that you did last time and land in your table. So you were done in like 10 seconds. And to me, I was like, oh, wow. This thing changes your life because now all that time you've been wasting in your organization cleaning up data suddenly became a, holy cow, I did it faster and I can reuse it. So, this became a big, big piece. So once I saw that, I was hooked. And then I started playing around. That's the text file. But you can import CSV files and database files and web pages and so many other pieces. You can bring them in, you can start changing them, you can flip. There's so many different pieces you can do. You can merge different data sets together. It really started to open the world into data. Where this became extremely impactful is that most Excel users deal with dirty, crappy data on a regular basis. And this to me became really, really obvious when I actually worked on a consulting project with a guy in Australia. And he was building a massive Power Pivot model. And it would take him like 3 weeks to do iterations. And then we'd hook up online and I'd give him some recommendations. And then he'd come back and he says, hey, I rebuilt it again. And I spent 2 weeks doing it this time. And I went, holy cow, okay. So then he'd ask for some more feedback and I'd give him some more. And he came back and he says, yeah, I rebuilt this one. This one only took me 9 days this time. That was great. And then we talked about Power Query, and then he phones me up. He says, hey, I need to talk to you about Power Query. I said, okay, great. He said, I rebuilt my model again. I said, really? How long did it take you this time? He said, 16 hours. And I said, how did you go from like 9 days to 16 hours? He says, you know what? He says, I reshaped all my data with Power Query. And he says, and once I did that, all the crazy DAX formulas I was writing in Power Pivot, I didn't need them anymore. My longest formula is 1 line long now.
Wow.
And I went, holy cow. And this is what the really important piece of this came out, is that why it was taking him so long is because his data wasn't in the right format to be used properly. And then Power Query, he could basically record and thereby accidentally automate the process of bringing his data in a format that Excel wanted to use in order to serve up its data properly. And that was the big thing. No more wild backflips to try and get this into a usable format. Instead, we've actually got it into a format that Excel is designed to work with to start with. That's what the power of Power Query is and why I got so incredibly hooked on it.
And I'm sure there's millions of people out there that are facing this issue every day and are not using Power Query. They're probably doing the manual way or they're using VBA macro. And for me, Power Query is VBA on steroids and even bigger than that, isn't it?
Well, it kind of is. I mean, I guess the one thing I want to say is, don't confuse Power Query with VBA. I mean, the programming languages are very different, although and that's the part where I kind of say that. I mean, call it semantics, if you will. But if you think you're going to take your VBA knowledge and port it into Power Query, think again, because they're totally different. And that's one of the reasons why we're writing the book, M is for Data Monkey, is to help Excel pros understand that programming language. But, the key thing, though, is that it does have some of the same functionality that we have in the Visual Basic editor, and the fact that in VBA we hit record macro and we go do our steps, and if we go back and look into the Visual Basic editor, we can see that it's recorded all of those individual steps. With Power Query, we don't even have to say record macro. We just open the thing up and start working, and it does actually record every single step that we do, and we can step backwards and forwards in them extremely easily. So for that side, it kind of has that VBA-like feature set, but the underlying language is inherently different. And I would certainly say to call that out. Having said that, when you work with VBA, you can record your macro and you have to go back in. And if you ever need to tweak it, you need to learn how to read VBA code. Inside Power Query, you can record the steps of what you're doing. And if you need to go back and tweak them, you can go back in and you can actually select a different step and you can make modifications without ever having to learn any coding whatsoever. Now, if you do learn coding, though, then it takes it to a whole nother level where you can do some amazing things. But that's sort of the difference between those things. I mean, honestly, I wish VBA had a user interface that was like Power Queries and the recording steps in a way. That would be really cool, because I think it would allow a lot more people to get into VBA. Power Query has a much easier bridge of entry. Yeah, Power Query is it's awesome. I got goosebumps talking about this.
Yeah, no, I can feel it. And what I'll do, I want to put some links on the show notes on how to install Power Query, because some people may not know how to install it, and it's pretty easy to do. So once you install it, you get this ribbon that says Power Query. And Ken, can you tell us just in a few words what each of the groups do? Now, the first one on the left is get external data.
So get external data is how you would go and reach out to actually pick up a data source from a variety of different places. So if I'm looking at the get external data, we can pick things off from the web. We can pick things out of different files. And there's all kinds of different file types that are actually set up inside here. We've got Excel files we can pull from, CSV, XML, text files. One of the coolest features in there, though, is that there's the ability to actually import every single file in a folder in one shot. Now, I love that. If you've got a bunch of text files or a bunch of CSV files, you just point to that folder and you open it up and it gives you a list of all the files. And you can, if it's a CSV or a text file, you can combine them all by clicking one button, all of them. So if you figure that you've got your January, your February, your March transactions, they're in 3 separate files, and you save them in that directory, you can import from folder and combine them by clicking one button, which is pretty amazing. So we've got from databases, from Windows Azure, if you're using your cloud hosted services, from other sources. Other sources has all kinds of stuff. I mean, I've seen Salesforce data combined. Actually, that was a cool story with Power Query. If I can just share this. I was at the PASS Business Analytics Conference, and I had a gentleman came up to me and he says, "Hey, I need some help with this thing. I'm trying to work out these Salesforce reports." And I said, "Great, now let's see what you're doing." So he showed me, and now he was working on a Mac, and that was his first challenge. And the reason I say that is because unfortunately still today, Mac doesn't have the Mac version of Excel, even the most recently released Mac Excel 2016 doesn't have any Power Pivot, Power Query, Power Map, or Power View features. Anything that says Power in front of it is dead, unfortunately, for the Mac. So we got him. I said, "Look, I'm going to show you something." So I booted up my Windows Excel and I said, "Look, I want to show you this Power Query thing. Let's connect to your Salesforce data." I said, "I'm going to need you to put in your password, but we'll wipe it when we're done." And we did. But we basically connected to his Salesforce data set. And in 5 minutes, we rebuilt the report that's taking him 2 weeks to build.
Wow.
Yeah, darn rights, wow. And I went,
wow.
And so he's running straight back to the office to say, "I'm going to install Fusion or Parallels and get Windows Excel on this machine because I got to have this. This is crazy how much time I'm wasting." So pretty neat stuff there. I mean, you can, there's Facebook data sources. Even you can pull email right from Microsoft Exchange or your contacts or calendars, SAP, other stuff like that. So that's pretty cool. All of those, I mean, it's a huge variety of different data sources. The web ones are kind of interesting because as long as you can get to a table or a page that has a table in it, those are the easiest to use, although you can parse raw HTML if you want. But I've actually used that to go and reach out to Weather Underground and actually pull weather forecasts and historical weather directly from an unmanned weather station on a rock in the middle of the Strait of Georgia, just off the coast of Vancouver Island. We used that so we could actually pull it in and put it together with our golf course data. So we had actual accurate weather to go with our sales statistics, which was pretty neat because
it's crazy.
In the golf course. Oh, it's neat, isn't it? I mean, you look at that and you go, like a few years ago, you'd say, well, what's the number one driver to your business in golf? Well, it's weather. But we don't capture that. But these guys do. So let's grab it and put it together. So yeah, some pretty neat stuff that goes on there. Lots of different data sources you can get at. It's your imagination is the limit on this stuff.
Awesome. And now the other group, Excel data from table.
Yeah. So Excel data, you can you got a one-click button to be able to actually pull from any contiguous data range inside an Excel worksheet. So as long as it goes from top left to bottom right, it'll grab that. If you've got non-contiguous data, there's a couple of tricks that you can deal with that. You can pull in from named ranges, or you can just say from table and expand the range as well. But that'll allow you to pull in data directly from any Excel worksheet in your workbook. It prefers reading from Excel tables, but as I say, named ranges work.
All right, cool. So, and the combined group, you got merge and append.
Yeah, those two are two totally different things. So for anybody that's used Power Pivot, what Power Pivot is great at is taking two tables, creating a relationship between them. So it's almost like they get merged into one great big flat table without having to actually do VLOOKUPs to get through there. And that's great. Power Pivot is incredibly good at that. Well, you know what? Power Query can do that too. It can actually merge those two tables together. And it actually really does create one big flat table. So if you hate VLOOKUP, well, you should really learn it and get better so you don't. But if you're really not a big fan of VLOOKUP and you need to join two tables together, Power Query can actually do that for you without a single VLOOKUP involved in the equation. It can take two tables and basically stitch them into one master table. So that's kind of nice. But what Power Pivot could never do for us is it could actually take your January table, your February table, your March table, and stack them into one long table. That was something Power Pivot could not do. Power Query will absolutely do that. So we can now start taking multiple individual files or multiple tables, and instead of having to copy from one and paste data at the end, Power Query can actually put them all together into one really, really long table, which you can then feed to Power Pivot, which is what Power Pivot really wants to eat. So that's a good thing. So,
all right, and how about the append? What does that do?
The append portion, as long as the column headers are the same when you append them together, that's good. If it's not, it'll actually create new columns for you for the other ones. So no big deal there at all.
And also saw that if you have data and you have a company name like MyExcelOnline.com and the other one is MyExcelOnline and you have a third one called MyExcelOnline LLC, there's a way where you can group that within Power Query.
Absolutely. You need to get into Power Query from there. So once you've loaded that original data into Power Query, whether it goes into, or whether you pull it from file or whether you pull it from a web page, inside Power Query itself, you can group data sets up so that you can actually, group all the records so you'd only end up with 3 that are totaling things up. Or if you're grabbing a table of data that is pivoted, you can unpivot it. And man, that is so cool when you see that happen for the first time. So you can unpivot, you can transpose data, so you can flip it on its ear. You can fill into open areas if there's a particular record you need to fill all the way down a column. There's so many things that you can do. It's really cool.
Look, I've just dabbed into Power Query. The possibilities are endless. I see the possibilities are endless, and it's just it's a new tool, and not many people have used it. Well, it's been around for a bit, but not a lot of people have used it. And I know that a lot of wasted time out there on just cleaning up data, on data cleansing. And Power Query does that, doesn't it? It cleans everything up. And then the next time you download the information, the data, bang, within one click, it puts it into a clean data set.
Yeah, it's a gorgeous thing. I mean, the other thing I think we should say with Power Queries, I mean, I don't know whether or not you've covered off in some of your other webcasts with Power Pivot. I mean, when Power Pivot first came out for 2010, it was so important to the product that they rolled it into Excel 2013 as part of the software. Power Query, when they released it, it was actually after 2013 was released, but they made it backwards compatible for 2010. And then they also had it available for 2013. It also was going to be rolled into Excel 2016. It's important to the future story of Microsoft Excel. It's a big piece of the go forward piece because it's going to make life so much easier for so many people.
Now, have you seen any weird or cool things done with Power Query?
Well, actually, I can tell you one weird that I saw. I saw actually the fellow that I do the Power Query workshop with tried to go and actually take a specific song and split it into a whole bunch of components so that he could measure the beats and the notes and whatever else in the song, which was it's not a data set I would have chosen. But hey, that's all cool, right? Wow. So I mean that was a little bit different. I've seen, cool things. Man, I just think the whole darn product is cool. But I was playing around with doing bank reconciliations using Power Query to identify what transactions are outstanding and what transactions have been cleared. The stuff that I think that's really cool is, it's cool from a technical and geeky perspective because I was actually able to build stuff that I wasn't able to do in the past. I think that might have even been one of the big catalysts that got me so excited about Power Query is that, when I was working in the resort, we had a specific set of data that we always wanted to get. It came out in a format that we couldn't use, though. And with Power Query and a little bit of experimentation, it took me about I think I'd been chasing this particular data set, trying to figure out how to unwind it for the better part of 5 years. And after playing around with Power Query, it took me about an hour. But after an hour, I realized that if I could bring it in and unpivot it, make some changes, repivot it, make some more changes, and unpivot it in a different way, it actually served up the information that we needed to be able to drive forward and use that in our business intelligence. And it sounds kind of weird, but I don't know how long it would have taken me. I'm an expert in VBA, and 5 years, we never did solve that problem. With Power Query, it took us an hour. And at that point, we could copy the code that it generated and send it to everybody in the organization going, here's the answer. That was really cool, but it's hard to visualize without an actual example. But unfortunately, since I left the organization, I couldn't take that one with me. So
that's fine. That's fine. Now, all this stuff, people need to learn this, and you have a course out there. You have a workshop, and let's talk a little bit about that because I know it's great value, and I am going to enroll into your next workshop. Now, it's a Power Query training workshop. Let's talk a little bit about the course and what it's about.
So the course itself can be found at powerquery.training. So Power Query being all one word. So basically what it is, it's a 3-day online live workshop. There's myself and Miguel Escobar is my partner in that workshop. And basically what we do is we run the meeting through GoToTraining. and people sign up and they come in to take advantage of this particular workshop. And what we do is we sort of break it down into about 15-minute blocks that we go through. And we start off from the very beginning of, let's go through and import a single CSV file, and then we import another CSV file, and then we show how to append those two tables together. And then we say, well, that's too much work, and we start to import multiple files at the same time. So we start working at it from the very, very beginning. In all the cases, I think there's only about 2 or 3 spots where we actually don't use real live data sets. We've actually gone back to an AdventureWorks sample, but wherever we can, we're trying to use real world data to try and illustrate why Power Query is so important as we go through, cleaning up dirty data and the text files that I talked about with all those repeating garbage rows and whatnot. We show how to import one of those guys and how to automate that process. Forcing import formats and stuff like that becomes critically important because as you know, being a little bit more internationally based than myself, most of the data that I get to work with is all in a US date format, even though I'm Canadian. But as soon as you start, branching outside of that, this becomes a huge headache for people because dates don't import right when you bring them in. So we look at how to force those kind of things, pull data in from the web, exchange, transposing data, unpivoting things. And we've got like 4 different varieties, I think, of different data sets that we use that are increasingly complex that need to be unpivoted that we sort of work through. Conditional logic, using like if statements, combining all your Excel files together in one shot. That's what I would sort of talk about as kind of the basics. And then we go into, we have about a half day where we actually start really looking at the advanced side of things. Let's talk about the M query language. What is this language that Power Query is actually recording as it goes along? How to understand what it does and the different advantages that gives us. We look at creating custom functions, and this is something that I'm really particularly proud of, is we actually implement what we have are called dynamic parameter tables. And these parameter tables allow us to actually start building dynamic solutions using Power Query so that they're always pointing to a file that's hanging off the root of whatever folder we're in. We can actually import all the files in a subfolder then at that point in time, no matter where it's stored or what folder path somebody has to it. We can then link that into Power Pivot. We can create dynamic calendar tables. So those are the first 2 days where we go through from start to finish, to say from knowing nothing through to like some pretty monster crazy stuff at the end. All of the example files that we use are provided. We also provide 6 practice assignments as well. Once the course is done, we send everybody the full HD recording for each day of those things. So you've got that to keep as well. But I think one of the most important pieces about this course is actually day 3. Because in day 3, we actually have a hosted Q&A session where Miguel and I go through and we invite people after the end of day 2. There's a week break between that and the Q&A session. We invite people to try the Power Query, try the different techniques that they've used, and then send us in data sets that we can work with and show how we would solve the issues with their own data. So the class attendees get to send in the issues that they're having problems with. Miguel and I work through those things, and then we actually use those and demonstrate that to the attendees on day 3 so that you can see, hey, I was having some real problems with this. How do the experts actually go through and deal with this? And then, of course, the solution gets to be recorded and kept so that you can look back at it afterwards as well. So to me, that's one of the big, really helpful pieces is not only do you get to learn all the different techniques, which I think is really important, but you get to see them in use on your own work. And that's the part that sometimes can really drive that nail home to say, holy cow, yeah, this is going to be so impactful in what I do on a daily basis.
Well, that's awesome. And also, you don't have to go out of your way to travel on site. This training is done online. So all you got to do is connect at a certain time in the US and you get access to the online training, correct?
Yeah, and having said that, if a company wants us to come on site and actually lead a hands-on session, at that point, then that whole day 3 becomes a full Q&A working with their data, which is really, really handy. So we'll do that. If that's of interest to somebody. But for the most part, yes. It's all conducted online. As I say, there is a recorded video of the entire thing for each of those days that is passed on to the attendees at the end as well. So we set up a time for the individual workshops. We let people know when they are, and then basically they just attend online. I can tell you that last time we had attendees for the last workshop we did from Ireland, from Germany, from the US, around the world. There was people there online with us as we were going through and doing the examples. So it seems to work relatively well. And for those people, I mean, there were some that couldn't stay for the whole day, but they got emailed the download link for the video afterwards, so they could catch up on the pieces that they weren't able to be there for. So we think it worked out really well, and the feedback that we got for it was very positive. So.
And how much is the cost of this course for the 3 days?
The list price on the course is $595 US. So that gives access to the full 3 days there.
Cool.
The days are, just for reference on these things, that they're a 5-hour day, but they do have 2 15-minute breaks and a 30-minute lunch in them so that people can catch up on their emails. And, we're conscious of the fact that people that are coming are business professionals and can't just turn off their workday.
Yep.
So you get three days, which is a 5-hour commitment each day, essentially, with some breaks for $595 US. Again, all the materials are passed on to you at the end of it as well. And I believe that we have arranged a discount code for your listeners, John, which you'll throw into the notes afterwards here.
All right, fantastic.
Make sure that somebody can get 10% off of it'll cost you about $550 US to get in for the 3 days.
Appreciate that, mate. And look, for someone to go on site and do some training, the flight alone will cost $200, $300, depending on where you are. And then you got the hotel expenses and you got food expenses. All up, it'll cost $2,000 for a 3-day training. And you're getting this for $500. And this is the future. Online workshops is the future. And this is a great way to learn and cheap as well, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I mean, overall, relatively speaking, I mean, I know we have put together quotes for companies that have expressed interest on site, and certainly, I mean, at the time when you look at it, I mean, those costs do end up getting pretty high, and I mean, some companies are okay with that. I mean, if they want to get somebody on site, but for a lot of us, we look at it and we go, man, I mean, that's out of my budget, and yet, the fact that you've got access to world-class trainers, and really, I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, I think, when you look at it and you go, geez, I mean, if it's, $550 for 3 days and you start doing the math backwards, it's not that bad at the end of the day. I mean, it's not like it's a 1-day class. I know, when I go and teach with different organizations, I mean, even when I'm doing a hands-on course, sometimes people are paying, $400 to $500 for a 1-day hands-on class. So,
wow.
Overall, I mean, we think that we're pretty good value on this, and we work very, very hard to make sure that the people that come agree with that by the time they're done. That's a big, important piece to us, is that we want to make sure people are getting value. And you know what? At the end of the day, honestly, I want to make sure that if you've paid your money to come into this, we are going to change your life. You're not going to import data the same ever again. No question.
And that's a small investment, $500, because once you learn Power Query, it's going to save you hours, days, and maybe months. So all the extra overtime hours, they're going to be gone. They're going to be gone, and it's a small price to pay if you have that luxury. So now the website is powerquery.training, and on there's a PDF file, correct? If people want to download it and have a look at all the different benefits of that course.
Yeah, if you go to powerquery.training/course, CORUSE, you can download the brochure there and take a look through what we cover, who we are, all that kind of good stuff. Yeah. I mean, if there's any questions, I mean, obviously bomb them through to the contact form, and we're more than happy to try and answer those as well. So,
all right, when is the next workshop?
The next workshop will be on August 26th and 27th. And every time that we put up a new course offering, it will be there. So even if you've got listeners that are listening, later on after this one's closed, keep checking the site for more, because we're going to keep on doing this stuff. It's really important that this message and this tool gets out there into the hands of as many as people as possible.
Mate, I'm sure. And I'm going to be on that training date. So make sure you reserve a spot for me. And
I will do so.
Fantastic. And is there a limit on the amount of people that can join up?
One of the big things that we want to make sure is that we're guaranteeing the quality and the attentiveness that we need for our attendees. So at the moment, we're trying to limit it to no more than 40 people in a session at one time. I mean, you've got both Miguel and I working on things, so we're trying to make sure that, while one of us is presenting, the other one is answering questions in the Q&A and stuff like that. But at the same time, I mean, we don't want to get to the stage where we're just pushing numbers through as big as we can and not allowing us to deliver the one-on-one when we need it, especially in the Q&A sessions. So right now we're limiting to 40. We're playing by ear and seeing how that goes. I mean, if things are still working really well after we've done this a few more times, we may decide to up it a little bit. But the number one piece to us is that we don't want to compromise the quality and being able to answer those questions in the Q&A and in the chat as we go along.
All right, guys, so you can find the links to this course by visiting the show notes on MyExcelOnline.com/podcast. Definitely worth your time and money, and go on there, sign up, because it'll be sold out. There's going to be some more dates down the year, and we're going to have that on the show notes as well. Now, let's take a short break, and we're back with Ken's favorite Excel tips.
Can you analyze this spreadsheet using Excel pivot tables?
Sure, if you can show me how to.
Introducing the Extreme Pivot Table online course, which teaches you how to analyze business data and highlight key metrics so that you can make insightful business decisions, create interactive analytical dashboards that will reach top management, and set you apart from your peers, which will make you more important and increase your chances of a promotion or pay rise. Developed over 15 years through extensive professional use and including real business case studies, it is the ultimate pivot table course. With over 200 short downloadable video tutorials accessible online anywhere 24/7. 12-month personal support if you ever get stuck, and a 30-day money-back guarantee. Visit MyExcelOnline.com today and give your professional development the boost it deserves.
As a listener to this podcast, I'm giving away a special discount to my Extreme Pivot Table course. All you have to do is apply the coupon code PODCAST in the checkout area. That is coupon code PODCAST for a special listener discount. We're back with Ken's Excel favorites. All right, Ken, I know that you use a lot of keyboard shortcuts every day, but what's one of your favorite and what does it do?
My favorite has to be Control-Alt-V-V. So Control-Alt-V will get you into the Paste Special dialog, and when you press your next V, that gives you values. I don't know why, but I seem to use that all the time, and I find it incredibly fast, much faster than going to the ribbon. So I'll Control-C to copy something, and Control-Alt-V-V will lock it down to values, and I'm good to go.
I've never used that, and I'm going to start tomorrow. Thanks for that.
There you go.
All right. What's your favorite Excel tip?
Besides Unpivot and Power Query? You want a keyword one?
Yeah, another one. Yeah. Oh, anything else? Anything else?
You know what? I like one of the cool things that I get to show when I'm out teaching Excel is I like to mystify people by committing the same formula to multiple cells at the same time. Control Enter to lock that formula down in multiple cells is always magic, and it always gets everybody kind of going like, why didn't you just do that? So, for people that haven't done that, if you're trying to write the same formula down, every row or every cell in a block, if you highlight your block first, so you've got your contiguous selection of cells, and then you type your formula and press Control Enter. So make sure it's not Control Shift Enter, because that gives you an array, but Control Enter, it will actually lock the formula into all of those cells at the same time, which just makes you look like a genius. And I mean, isn't that what it's all about? Right?
That's
it's all
right.
about that guy that's looking over your shoulder. So
that's right. That's an awesome tip I want to use every day. Now, I know that you've used a lot of functions throughout your Excel life. What's one that really stands out and why?
My favorite function to use is EO month.
Mm-hmm.
So that is the function that allows you to take any date and return the end of the month. It's always been in Excel, but it was always in the analysis tool pack, so you had to turn it on. But in Excel 2007, that changed, and you could actually use the analysis tool pack functions by default. So it's quite simple. It's just EO month. so which stands for end of. So end of month, you open your brackets, you throw your date in there, comma, and then at that point you've got, you can either put in, it's a number. So you either go with 0, which will give you the end of the month for the current date that you provided, or you can go -1, which will go back 1 month, or you can go +1, which will push you forward 1 month. And obviously you can, make that number as big as you need. But working in the accounting industry, a lot of the data that we had to deal with was always tied back to, we don't care what day of the month it is. We want to get to the month end because that's where all the reporting happened. So EO month is a great function to allow you to advance to the end of the month. And it works beautifully, whether it's February 28th or 29th, it'll actually give you that kind of information and you can shift it back and forward. So that's definitely got to be my favorite, even though it's maybe not, one of the ones I use every day. It's totally my favorite. That's because you're an accountant. Yeah, don't hold it against me, all right? I'm an accountant as well, so there you go. And I use that. Oh, there you go. Good stuff. So what's one Excel add-in that you use constantly and it's not Power Query? I actually wrote my own Excel add-in called XLG Favorites. This was based on the work of a fellow named Daniel Clan who wrote his original Favorites add-in, and I retooled it for a bit for Excel 97 through 2003, and I also wrote another one that was called Use Templates. And in Excel 2007, when I was rebuilding my add-in to deal with the ribbon, I actually merged the two of them together. So XLG Favorites allows me to basically have a most recent files list, most recent folders list, but it shows up on a tab on the ribbon. You can download it for free from my website. I love this because it lets me bookmark files. It lets me bookmark folders that I can open things in so that, when I'm teaching a course or whatnot, and I'm trying to get into the example files for the folder, I don't have to browse the entire folder directory structure to get down there. I can actually bookmark my favorite folder and hit, open from this folder. It'll open right there, which is great without having to go into pinned files or anything like that. So it gets click a little bit closer. I can set up multiple databases so I can keep all those different guys, set up for individual courses and flip back and forth between them. Excel feels naked to me if I don't have this add-in installed. I mean, it's that much. I use it every single day. I can bookmark Excel files, text files, and I can open them up right from Excel. Doesn't matter. It is far and away the add-in that I cannot live without. It's available on my site. The only thing is, if you're Googling it, you have to spell favorites correctly. Favorites has a U in it. Although I did actually add a switch in the settings so that you can actually change it to favorites if you prefer US English. So I was trying to be conscious of my neighbors down south here. So good stuff. All right, buddy. If you could recommend one Excel book for our listeners, what would it be? The Excel book that I loved and wore out and whatnot was called Power Programming for VBA by John Walkenbach. I love John's work. He's written more Excel books than I think anyone else on the planet at this point in time, although Bill Jelen is catching him up pretty quick, I think. Yeah. I see Bill's just doing his 40th book right now. But Power Programming with VBA, it was an absolutely fantastic resource for me when I was learning VBA. That's the way I think books should be written and structured and whatnot. And I mean, as I go through and I write my books, I mean, I'm always conscious of the way that John did his work in those kind of things. And I hope to be, half the author he is when I get my stuff out there. So great stuff. So John is a legend in the Excel world, and I got to get him on this show one day if I can track him down. All right, guys. So you can find the links to this book and everything we've been chatting about today, including tutorials on Ken's favorite shortcuts and tips, by visiting MyExcelOnline.com/podcast. All right, Ken, we've come to the last question of the show. Now, let's say it's my first time ever seeing Excel. So I'm a beginner. I could be an intermediate user, and I've got an important job interview coming right up. Now, with all the Excel knowledge that you know today and the online and offline resources available, what would be the quickest way for me to start learning Excel? Wow, that's a tough one. All right, well, I'm going to plug a course that I did, if that's okay with you. Go for it. I've got a course that I worked with a company called Go Skills. There is a Excel Basic and Advanced course at Go Skills, which was actually built specifically for that purpose. The idea was to take somebody who has little to no knowledge of Excel and get them schooled up and ready to go so that when they're in that job interview, they can feel confident enough answering the questions and being able to use Excel on a regular basis. So you can find that at goskills.com. It's the Excel Basic and Advanced course, although you can go into just Basic or just Advanced if you wanted to as well. But that'll give you a really broad brush approach to Excel on the the sort of the macro level. So it gives you lots of different features and gets you up and ready to go. That's by far, I think, probably the fastest way to skill yourself up. If you want to take Excel to an incredibly deep level, then you start looking for, this generally happens when you're out there in the workforce. That's where you find your own business problems that you're dealing with and find a forum to try and help bring that knowledge along. I think those two things really go hand in hand, though. The basic training to get yourself started, and then the self-actualization part is where you actually start trying to take that further and become much deeper. But certainly, if you're looking to start off with the basics, check out that Go Skills course. It's very good, and we designed it specifically with that focus in mind.
Now, out of all of the Excel features out there, what will be the best Excel feature that I should focus on to get ready for this job interview?
That's a great question. And honestly, John, in that one, it's a tough one to answer because it really depends on what the job is. If I'm going into the accounting world, when I used to do job interviews and tried to hire people, one of my favorite questions is, what's the final parameter of VLOOKUP and what does it do if you forget? And to me, I was able to immediately separate somebody who knows a lot about Excel from somebody who doesn't based on that one question. But at the same time, that's if we're looking for somebody who I'm trying to bring in to be an analyst, or I'm trying to bring in to build solutions. When I was hiring a junior clerk for accounts receivable or whatnot, the question was more along the lines of, what's the most complicated thing you've ever done in Excel? Tell me about what you built and what did it do? Because I want to know, can you write individual formulas and whatnot? The biggest key piece, I guess, if you're working into an entry-level job, is I'd like to see that somebody has a good command of formulas, some formulas, some averaging formulas and stuff like that. Nothing extremely detailed and whatnot. Do you know how to create a table? Not just blocks of numbers, but an actual official table, because that means that you can probably sort data and your formulas aren't going to go astray on you. If you're working into an analyst job, well, then the questions are going to become a lot harder because, there's more that you need to know. So it's a tough one to answer. It really depends on what the job role is, what you're expecting to be done and whatnot.
Great answer nonetheless, and appreciate that. Ken, mate, you are an Excel guru, and that's why you are called Excel Guru. And thanks to people like you, a lot of Excel users are going to learn and appreciate Excel. And I'm going to be one of them as well. I'm going to learn so much from you in terms of Power Query. And mate, I appreciate you coming on the show. And before you leave, what's the best way for our listeners to connect with you?
You know what? You can get me on LinkedIn. There's a Excelguru Facebook fan page. You can get us at our forum. I'm on Twitter as well at Ken Puls. I'm all over the place, man.
Good stuff. That's the way to be.
Probably. Yeah, the best way, honestly, if you want me as a connection on LinkedIn, fire it through. I'm happy to accept those. And then, I'm blogging weekly on Power Query at excelguru.ca/blog. That always goes out on my Twitter page, on my Facebook page, and on my LinkedIn page. So if you hit any of those particular mediums, you'll get notified of updated blog posts and stuff that are coming out. And, on my Facebook page, I occasionally post other stuff as well when I'm out doing courses and stuff like that too. So any of those mediums is good to connect with me.
Thanks, Ken, mate. You're a legend. You're an Excel legend. You should change your name from Excel Guru to Excel Legend, because in my eyes, mate, you're on a different planet, and I appreciate you coming on. And I'm going to get you on another time, and hopefully you can teach something else rather than Power Query, maybe Power Map or Power View.
Well, maybe not the last one, but maybe the other one. Yeah, we'll talk about it. Anyway, thanks, John. I appreciate the time, and the flattery is great. I'm just a guy out there that likes to learn and share my knowledge. That's all it is. So
good stuff. Thanks
for having me on. I appreciate it.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the MyExcelOnline podcast. Be sure to subscribe and share this with your colleagues so they can reach their full Excel potential. You can also visit MyExcelOnline.com/podcast for show notes, as well as John's online Excel courses and free tutorials to help you stand out from the crowd. Until next time, keep excelling.